Chicago, 1966. A psychology laboratory on the third floor of a university building, and a man is listening to a tape recorder with an expression the researchers have never seen before. He is not listening to a confession. He is not listening to bad news. He is listening to himself, recorded 10 minutes earlier, reading a neutral passage about the weather. And his face is doing something that Philip Holtzman, the psychologist running the experiment, will spend years trying to explain. It is doing disgust, not embarrassment, not surprise, disgust. The same facial configuration humans make when they smell spoiled meat. Holtzman runs the experiment again. Different subject, same reaction. He runs it dozens of times, and the pattern holds so consistently that he has to invent a name for it. He calls it voice confrontation, because that is what it looks like from the outside, not a person hearing a sound, a person being confronted by something. You already know this feeling. You have felt it in the 2 seconds after a voicemail starts playing, in the moment a video of you begins and you reach for the volume before anyone else can hear it. That small internal flinch. The immediate non-negotiable verdict. That is not what I sound like. Here's the first thing you need to understand, and it is going to get stranger from here. You are not vain. You are not insecure. What happens in your body in that moment is not an opinion about audio quality. It is a threat response, a very old one. And by the end of this, you are going to understand that the cringe you feel when you hear your own recorded voice is one of the most sophisticated survival mechanisms your brain runs, operating flawlessly on the wrong century. Start with the part everyone thinks they know. When you speak, the sound of your voice reaches your ears along 2 separate routes. The first is the one everyone else gets. Sound waves leaving your mouth, traveling through the air, entering your ear canal. The second route is yours alone. The vibrations of your vocal cords travel directly through the bones of your skull, through the jaw, through the temporal bone, straight into the cochlea, the spiral organ of your inner ear. And bone is not a neutral messenger. Bone conduction favors low frequencies. It carries the deep, warm, resonant components of your voice and delivers them from the inside. So the voice you hear when you speak is a private mix, air plus bone. Everyone else hears air alone, which means the recording is not wrong. The recording is the only accurate version. The voice on the tape, thinner, higher, smaller than you expected, that is the voice you have been broadcasting to every person you have ever met. And here's the first thing you should sit with. You have never once heard your real voice live, not in your entire life. Every conversation you have ever had, every argument, every apology, every time you said someone's name, the sound that came out of you was heard accurately by everyone in the room, except you. The recording is not a distortion of your voice. Your entire life has been the distortion. The tape is just the first honest witness. If the story ended there, it would be a curiosity, a party fact. But Holtzman knew it did not end there because of what happened next in his lab. He explained the bone conduction effect to his subjects. Carefully, completely, they understood it. They could repeat it back to him. And then he played the tape again. The disgust came back anyway. Knowing why the voice sounded different did nothing. Whatever was reacting inside these people, it was not the part of the mind that processes explanations. It was something underneath, something that does not read the research. To find it, you have to go into the machinery of the speaking brain, and the machinery is stranger than almost anyone realizes. Every time you prepare to speak, your brain does something extraordinary about 1/10 of a second before any sound exists. The motor regions planning the movement of your lips, tongue, and vocal cords send a duplicate of their instructions, a carbon copy, to your auditory cortex. Neuroscientists call it an efference copy. It is, in the most literal sense, a prediction, a preview of the sound you are about to make, delivered to your hearing system in advance. And when the actual sound arrives, milliseconds later, your auditory cortex compares it against the preview. If they match, something remarkable happens. Your brain turns the volume down. Researchers can watch this on EEG. The electrical response of the auditory cortex to your own speech is measurably suppressed compared to its response to any other sound. It is called speaking-induced suppression. And it is why you can talk for an hour without being startled by the noise coming out of your own head. Your brain, in other words, partially mutes you to yourself. Every sentence you speak is pre-approved, pre-heard, and pre-softened before it reaches your awareness. That is the deal your nervous system made. I will predict you, so I never have to be surprised by you. Now, play the recording. The voice comes out of the speaker, and no efference copy arrives, no preview, no prediction. Your motor system is silent because you are not speaking. So your auditory cortex receives this voice the way it receives every unpredicted sound in the world, at full volume, unmuted, tagged as external, tagged specifically as someone else. And this is where the survival machinery wakes up, because now your brain is holding two pieces of information that cannot both be true. The sound is classified as a stranger. The content is unmistakably you, your words, your name, your rhythm of thought. A stranger is speaking, and the stranger is you. There is a network in your brain whose job is to resolve exactly this kind of conflict. The insula, buried deep in the fold between your temporal and frontal lobes, monitors the boundary between self and not self. It handles interoception, the sense of your own body from within. It also handles disgust, the same structure. This is not a coincidence, and it is the reason Holtzman's subjects made the face they made. Disgust is not primarily an emotion about ugliness. It is an emotion about contamination, about something foreign appearing where only self should be. When your insula receives a voice that is simultaneously you and not you, it responds with the exact alarm it evolved to produce when the boundary of the self is breached. That flinch when the voicemail plays. That is not embarrassment. That is your brain running its contamination protocol on your own identity. And for some people, the protocol does not stop at a flinch. Consider what this looks like when it fully takes hold. There are people, more than you would guess, who have quietly re-engineered their lives around never hearing themselves. They text instead of calling. They let every voicemail sit unheard, sometimes for years, a small red badge of dread on the phone screen. They record a voice note, play it back, delete it, record it again, delete it again, 7, 8 takes for a 20-second message, and then send a text instead. In meetings held over video, they mute themselves not to block noise, but to avoid the risk of an echo returning their own voice to them. One documented sufferer, a school teacher, described listening to a recording of her own lesson as feeling like being read a transcript of everything wrong with her by someone doing an impression of her. She stopped recording her classes. Then she stopped volunteering to speak at staff meetings. Then she noticed years later that she had built an entire professional personality around saying as little as possible and could not remember deciding to. That is the signature of every phobia in this series. The avoidance works, the relief is real, and every time the avoidance succeeds, the brain files the escape as evidence that the threat was genuine, tightening the alarm one more notch. The fear teaches itself. But wait, because the science now takes a turn that should not be possible, and it dismantles the last comfortable explanation you have left. In 2013, researchers Susan Hughes and David Harrison ran an experiment with a quiet, devastating design. They recorded people's voices, mixed them into a lineup of other voices, and asked the subjects to rate the attractiveness of each voice. Many subjects failed to recognize their own voice in the lineup, and when they did not recognize it, they rated their own voice as more attractive than other people rated it, more attractive than they rated other people's voices. Read that again slowly. When your brain does not know a voice is yours, it likes it. Objectively, the sound is fine, better than fine. So, the thing you hate was never the sound. The moment of revulsion happens only when recognition arrives, when the label "this is me" gets stamped onto the stranger's voice. It is not an acoustic judgment. It is an identity collision. You do not hate your voice. You hate the ownership. Which brings us back to Holtzman because he saw one more thing in his data, the finding almost nobody talks about, and the one that explains why any of this exists at all. His subjects were not only disturbed by the pitch. When he asked them what bothered them, they said things like, "I sound anxious. I sound insincere. I sound like I'm trying too hard." The recording was showing them what he called extra-linguistic cues. The leakage, the hesitation before a word, the strain under a casual tone, the tiny tremor of an emotion they thought they had hidden. Inside your head, buffered by bone and softened by prediction, you hear your intended self. The recording plays back your transmitted self, and in the gap between those two, everything you thought you were concealing is visible. Now ask the evolutionary question. Why would a brain build an alarm this loud, this fast, this immune to explanation, just for that gap? Because for most of human history, that gap could kill you. You are descended from a species that survived by group membership. For hundreds of thousands of years, a human alone was a human dead. And your standing in the group was negotiated, moment to moment, through your voice. Tone carried status. Steadiness carried trustworthiness. What you signaled determined whether you were protected or expelled. Your brain therefore evolved to run continuous quality control on your social broadcast, and to treat any discovered mismatch between the self you meant to send and the self that actually arrived as an emergency, because it was one. If the tribe was hearing weakness you did not know you were showing, you needed to know immediately, and it needed to hurt enough that you would fix it. That is the survival mechanism. The cringe is a calibration alarm. It is your nervous system screaming, the version of you being received is not the version of you being sent. Correct it before it costs you. For 200,000 years, that alarm had no way to fire at full strength, because no human could ever step outside their own skull and hear their transmitted self directly. The system watched other people's reactions and guessed. Then, in 1877, Thomas Edison recorded a human voice onto tinfoil, and for the first time in the history of the species, the alarm could be triggered on demand. Every voicemail you have ever winced at is that ancient system encountering a technology it has had, in evolutionary terms, no time to understand. The machinery is not malfunctioning. It is doing precisely what it was built to do. It is just doing it 200,000 years out of context. At this point, it feels like the mystery is solved. Prediction error plus identity conflict plus an obsolete social alarm. Case closed. Habituation should fix it. Hear yourself enough, the prediction updates, the alarm quiets. Except that is not what happens. And the exception is where this gets genuinely dark. Radio hosts, singers, voice actors, people who hear their recorded voice thousands of times, report that the revulsion fades but rarely disappears. Something in the system refuses to fully update. And when scientists went looking for why the self-voice machinery is so strangely rigid, they found something they were not looking for. The efference copy system, the same prediction circuit that mutes your voice to yourself, turns up at the center of research into auditory hallucinations. In studies of schizophrenia, patients who hear voices show measurably weakened speaking-induced suppression. Their auditory cortex fails to recognize self-generated inner speech as self-generated. The prediction does not arrive, the sound is not muted, and the brain does what your brain does with your voicemail. It tags the voice as external, as someone else. The leading models propose that at least some hallucinated voices are the person's own inner voice, stripped of its ownership tag. Sit with what that means. The discomfort you feel hearing a recording of yourself is a brief, controlled taste of one of the most feared experiences in psychiatry. The only thing standing between hearing yourself and hearing voices is a 1/10 of a second prediction signal, firing correctly every time you speak. Your sense that your thoughts are yours, that the voice narrating your life from inside is you, is not a fact. It is a computation, a signature that has to be checked and re-stamped thousands of times a day. The cringe at the recording is the sound of that stamping machine encountering a document it cannot certify. And that is the last door, so let's walk through it. You have been assuming this whole time that there is a real voice somewhere in this story, that one of these two versions, the warm one inside your skull or the thin one on the tape, is the true one, and the other is the copy. But the inner voice is a construction. Bone conduction bends it. Speaking-induced suppression mutes it. The efference copy pre-approves it. The self you listen to all day is edited by your own brain before you are allowed to hear it. Softened, deepened, smoothed, and stamped as safe. The recording is unedited, which is exactly why every ancient system you own rejects it. Somewhere tonight, you will speak to someone you love, to a coworker, to yourself in an empty room. And two voices will exist in that moment, as they always have, the one only you have ever heard, and the one everyone else has heard your entire life. Every person who knows you knows the second one. They fell in love with it, argued with it, trusted it, remembered it. The voice you think of as you has been heard by exactly one person in history. So the question your brain has been protecting you from, the one the alarm fires to keep you from asking, is not, do I really sound like that? It is this: if everyone you have ever known knows the other voice, which one of you do they know? Your amygdala would prefer you not think about that tonight. You will anyway.